So here's the one-to-one comparison, Cypress versus Playwright for the most typical scripting operations. Cypress on the left and Playwright on the right. So let's start with the how test is organized. In Cypress, you would have this it function with the first argument name of the test, and the second argument is a callback function. It's empty callback function, and inside of the body of this function, you would write your test. In Playwright, you would have quite similar experience, but the name of this function will be test. The first argument will be name of the test, and then you will have asynchronous function, which is also a callback function, and inside of the body of this function, you would write your test. You notice that the difference that in Cypress you don't have here anything, but in Playwright you have async and page. So why is that? In Cypress, you would use just a built-in object, which is called cy, to trigger all the operations, and everything else will be hidden under the hood, under the Cypress. But Cypress also have all those asynchronous operations. They just hidden from the user, from the scripting perspective. While in Playwright, you would have more raw scripting access to the code with all those, async awaits keywords that you have to call and not forget them to call. And since we execute asynchronous operations and we use keyword await for our commands to trigger them, we need to use keyword async. And the page over here, which Cypress also doesn't have, page in Playwright is a page fixture that you call in the test to interact with the different elements. So page technically is the new instance of the web browser that you're going to use for your test. And if you have experience with a WebDriver before, think about it as a WebDriver instance that you call WebDriver and then trigger the elements. This is kind of similar case with the Playwright. You call the page and then call your methods. So for the Cypress to open a new page, for example, you call the global cy object dot, then method visit, and then provide URL of the website that you want to visit. In our example, for this demo, we're going to use playground bondaracademy.com. In Playwright, very similar, but you have to use a keyword await for every action commands, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, when to use await and when not. So go to is an action command, so you have to use a keyword await, then provide URL to the website, and that way navigate to the website. And here is the application that we're going to use, and let's select some web element using both browsers. For example, let's click on this drop down. So first I need to identify the locator for this guy, and we need to find something like this class header container, and within this class we have a select button, something like this. So I copy this value, go into the code, and in Cypress you would type something like cy and method to get the element. It would be method either get or find or contains. So method contains search by text, method find is to find only child elements, and method get is to find the elements. The syntax is this. So if you want to search element by ID, you provide the hash sign. If by a class name, you would use a dot, and by any other attribute, you would use a square braces. In our example, it's a class. So first we find a header container and then space, and within this header container, let's say we want to find this select button, which is also a class, and I type dot class. And then I want to click, so I type after the dot click, and that's pretty much it. So let's run this. In Cypress, you basically have two ways how you can run the test, using either command line or runner. So let me show you the Cypress runner. This is how it looks like. And I just click on the cy.js file and it runs the test. And here we go, the test is executed. You can see the steps that were performed. You can also see that drop down is expanded. Well, that works. Now let's do exactly the same thing in the Playwright, what we need to do. So in Playwright, I would need to call a keyword await because we're going to use an action command. Then I call our page fixture, then method to select the elements. Playwright have more options. So the typical one is just a locator, if we want to follow the similar syntax like Cypress has. But also Playwright has a group of get by elements, such as get by label, get by placeholder, and especially useful is get by role. So it's considered a best practice in the Playwright to use method get by role to find the element. But for this demo, since we are trying to map one-to-one a Cypress versus Playwright experience, I will use method locator, and what I do, I basically provide exactly the same syntax like I had here, because the syntax would match it, just CSS selector, and call click as well. And let's run this test. So Playwright also have similar experience to the Cypress. This is the Playwright UI mode, as they call it. And let's run this test over here, running the test. And application was opened successfully. But you do not see menu to be expanded. So you can see only the dot that the click was performed. And the reason is that this view is not actually a browser. This is a screenshot of the step that was performed. And the Playwright collects three types of the screenshots: action that was performed, then before the action, how UI looked like, and after the action. You see, on the UI, we have the menu is expanded. And this is important difference between the UI modes of Cypress and Playwright, because in Cypress, this is actually a real browser. So after the test is executed, I can click here and there and navigate free inside of the application. While in Playwright, this is not a browser over here. It's just a screenshot, a picture, what was in the browser during the execution. And also you see, because of that, because this is a picture, sometimes this picture can be corrupted by not correctly loaded element, not in time or something, and can look like this. Because in our real application, we have a nice slider right here and those nice dynamic elements and so on. If your page has dynamic elements or some animation or something like this, in UI mode, it can sometimes be displayed incorrectly. So in this case, I would recommend to use just a real browser execution, which is also possible in Playwright just by running real browser through the Playwright extension in Visual Studio Code. All right, so we are moving on. So you can see interacting with the elements, clicking on the elements is quite a similar experience. You just need to not to forget use this await keyword, otherwise it's not going to work correctly. So moving on. So now let's talk about variables. How would you work with variables in Cypress? Let me start with the Playwright first, because Playwright provides you a more traditional experience. So let's say I want to click on the form menu item. I want to save this menu item as a locator and then use it later. So how would you do it in Playwright? So very traditional experience. You create, for example, a new constant, and I call it form menu item equals to page dot get by text. Let's grab this by text and get by text form. Is it form or forms? It is forms. Forms menu item. And then what you do is await forms menu item dot click, like this. Let's run this real quick, rerunning this test. Yeah, you can see forms menu item was expanded. And one difference about the await. So here we were using await because the click is the operation that we want to perform. And here get by text is just a locator. It's not doing anything. That's why await is not needed. But we call await over here because the click is the action that we want perform for our locator. If I will remove this line and will try to execute this code, Playwright will simply ignore this line and will not do anything because we are not triggering any action. While in Cypress, for example, if I will remove the click from here and will execute this line, Cypress will still find this web element, but will not just click and not do anything, but still will perform a search. Playwright will not. So moving on, this is how you would do working with the constants. In Cypress, though, if you would type something like cy contains, we want to get by text as well. For the Cypress, it will be method contains. And if you would try to do something like const, let me create the same constant here, constant equals to cy contains, and then forms menu item dot click. So let me run this and refresh. And it seems like it is working, right? So we were successfully clicked on the forms and the menu is expanded. But this is not how you would work with variables or constants in Cypress. It seems like it's working, but it's not, just trust me. So Cypress is not designed to handle the constants like that. You cannot assign the result of the expression to the constant and then use it later. Cypress works asynchronously, and if you try to write this code, somewhere it backfire for sure and will not work correctly. Instead, you need to save the resulted context into the thing called alias. This is internal Cypress thing, so let me comment this code. And it would look something like this. So Cy contains forms, and then I call method as, because after the contains is executed, it has the result of this execution. And then the result of this execution through dot notation, we save to the alias that I would call forms menu item. And then when I want to use it, I call Cy get, and through the add sign, I call this variable, and then I can click it. So that's some specific of how the scripting, specifically Cypress scripting, is designed. Well, it is what it is, just because of this asynchronous nature, and because Cypress hiding from us all this async await objects and all that stuff. To simplify as much as possible, they had to go this route, and this is how it would work. So let's go one more time, refresh, and you see it's also working. Forms was selected. This is the alias defined, and then we interacted with this alias, and click was performed. All right, moving on. Another interesting concept that exists in the Cypress called Cypress chains, when you chain the commands one by one using the dot notation. And this is how it can be used. And the Playwright doesn't have it, so I just want to show you the scripting difference. So for example, let's navigate to the form layouts page. So I would do something like Cy contains form layouts dot click. Let's see, did it work? Yeah, we are on the form layouts page. And then here, let's say within this using the grid. So we find this entire form, and then we first find this sign in button, click on that, and then type something into the input field using a single chain of the command. So let me show you how you can do that. So let me inspect, and I would find my starting point for this form. So scrolling down. So this is the form using the grids. And I guess this is what I'm looking for. So NB card that has the text using the grid. So let me do this. So going down, Cy.contains, and I'm looking for NB card that has text, using the grid. This guy using the grid. Then within this card, and I can start like this vertically doing the chain, I want to find a button, because this is form has a single button. We can use just a button HTML tag to click on this button. Then I want to click on this button. Then after that, so let me go back. So this is our UI, right? We found the form, then we click on the button. Then we want to go back up into the context to find the form again. So I can select something like dot parents, and I want to select the parent form for this button. And then within this form, I want to find, for example, the input fields. And since we know we have two input fields on the page, input field number 1 and number 2, I want to select the first input field. So I type dot first, and then inside of this input field 4, I want something to type, for example, hello world, something like this. And going back to Cypress runner, And here we go. While we were typing, the test was already executed. 1, 2, 3. You can see hello world was typed successfully into the input field. And this is the concept of the chain. So I called cy just once, and then .find, .click, .parents, .find, .first, .type, and so on. You can keep this chain on and on and on and on without absolutely chaining the cy one more time. Important note over here. It is considered kind of best practice to start a new chain after the click command, because once you trigger a click or other action may change the structure of the DOM, and Cypress, it's kind of remembering the entire DOM of the commands that you execute. And if the DOM changed, then Cypress for the next command will be like, hey, I don't know what to do because the element was detached from the DOM. So normally if you have action commands, start a new chain. But in general, you can continue this chain kind of endlessly and trigger commands one by one. This helps often to write kind of compact commands and compact scripts. So now let me show you how the same kind of scenario you would do in Playwright. Okay, so first of all, await page, and we need to find what? We need to use a locator. We are looking for element in bcard, this guy, and bcard that has text, and the text we are looking for is this one. Okay, and then within this in bcard we want to find locator button, and then make a click like this. Let me resize it a little bit to the side of the Cypress, and then we make a click. And that's it. You cannot continue after the click done. If I put dot, look, there are no options. So when you perform the action, you cannot make another dot and call another command and another command. No, it's done. So you need to go to the next line right here and type again await, because if we want to await, if we want to perform the next steps after the clicking the button, we want, for example, type into the input field. We kind of need to start everything from the beginning, like page.locator. We find our page again, then locator, which is input, and we need to find a first input field, and inside of it we want to fill instead of type, and we would fill hello, something like this. So let me put it to the next line so it will be more visible. Yeah, like this. So you see it's kind of a little bit more code to write in Playwright compared to the Cypress. Well, this is how the scripting works, and let me run this to see if it is working. Okay, no, it's not. Something is missing. Oh, okay, we did not navigate to the form layout. So await page dot get by text. Form layouts dot click like this, and then we can run it one more time. Yeah, and word hello was printed successfully. All right, and we are moving on. And the final typical scripting thing I want to show you in both frameworks is assertions. For example, in Cypress, let's do the assertions. So let's say that I want to make assertion for the using the grid, the same thing, and I want to find the button, and I want to make the assertion that my button has a text sign in and that this button is enabled. How about that? So in Cypress, I would do something like find the button, and then I called should have text sign in, and then I can continue the chaining another assertion if I want to validate something for this element again, and I can call and something like be enabled, something like this. That's it. So this is how you would easily make validations in the Cypress. This is how you would do the same operation in the Playwright. So in Playwright, first it is, I think would be recommended, considering the size of the locator, save this locator as a constant, just for the convenience of the scripting. So I save the constant, which is sign in button equals to, this is my locator, and then there is expect library to perform the assertions, and I expect this sign in button, and I need to remember that this is a locator assertion, so I need to use a keyword await, expect sign in button to have text sign in. And if I want to make the second assertion, I would technically need to repeat this assertion one more time. So Control-C, Control-V, and I call my constant one more time and call just a different assertion to be enabled. This is what I'm looking for. And let's run this test and to see if it is working. So running the Playwright. Okay, why it didn't work? So assertion is failed. Okay, this is strange. Let's check it out. Inspect and oh, here we go. Sign in. In should be a lowercase. Okay, going back to the test. So it should be sign in, and let me rerun it one more time. All right, now it's passed, and let's do the same in Cypress. Yeah, it's already passed. 1, 2, 3. You see, 2 assertions passed successfully. All right, so that's pretty much main differences Cypress versus Playwright. The scripting experience is a little bit different. So you may think that Cypress is slightly easier to code, and it's actually true. But at the same time, there can be sometimes edge cases when you may have a certain limitations. While in Playwright, you would have a little bit more like traditional coding experience when you write your code line by line, execute it line by line, using normal constants, assertions. Don't need to forget, use async await, that kind of stuff sometimes can be boring. And overall, because of this more raw experience and more exposed to the real actual coding, Playwright can be slightly more flexible when you're setting up your test scenarios. So this is something that you need to consider. So, and also one more thing, if you're thinking about Cypress route, Cypress for the parallel execution will require you to sign up for their Cypress cloud service, while Playwright, to run tests in parallel, it's completely free. Playwright is fully open source. This is just one little note if you are planning to write a lot of tests and you know that you will need a parallel execution. If you have a small project, if you need to write like 20-30 tests, it's fine running just a single thread, then Cypress would work just fine for you as well. All right, let me know what you think about it. If you have any other questions about any of those frameworks, let me know in the comments. Other than that, see you in the next video.